Welcome back to GlowPOP Reads. The story I'm currently reading is Bendy and the Ink Machine, Dreams Come to Life by Adrian Kress. If you haven't seen the previous chapter, I suggest you listen to that before this one so you can catch up with what's going on. But if you've already done so, I hope you'll enjoy this one. Also, be sure to subscribe, leave comments, and click the bell for more content. Don't forget to support me on other social media sites, and feel free to leave me a coffee as well. Links are in the description. And now, on with the story. Chapter 17. I don't know how I got there, or how long it took. I don't know if I took the subway or ran the whole way. I wasn't out of breath when I arrived, but I was slicked with sweat. Though whether it was from my fear or the heat, I couldn't say. I just don't know. I just know that I was home, and I burst into the dark apartment, and I couldn't hear the silence of the sound of my hard feet hitting the wooden floor. Just my heart pumping my blood through my body, thumping in my ears. I burst into my room. My ghostly grandfather lay as he always did, flat on his back, the street lamp making him seem so pale, all skin and bones. I made my way around the bed to his side to look at the drawings. They were how I'd left them, scattered about on the floor, as I'd frantically gone through them, seeing the changes, feeling anxious. I got to my knees to gather them up, but as I did, my fear came pulsing back. They were blank. All the pages on the floor were blank. I flipped them over, examined both sides, just blank white paper. I looked up, frantic. That's when I saw it. A trail of ink running up the side of the blanket, up along the long sleeves of Grandpa's nightshirt, tracing up his neck, heading for his mouth, like veins or like a river of blood, except going up. Toward him, fingers, reaching for him. "No!" I cried out. I leapt up beside my grandfather and shook him, pulling him up to a sitting position. His eyes burst open wide, and he started thrashing about, clawing at my arms, holding on to his. He screamed out in terror, or in pain, or both. It's okay, I said, but he wouldn't stop moving, and it wasn't okay. He was still covered in the ink. I reached up, trying to wipe the ink off his neck with my hand, but he grabbed my wrist and pushed at me hard then, harder than I thought a man his age could push. I fell backward. What on earth? Somehow Ma was in the room, on the bed, reaching for her father. "Papa!" She held his face firmly but gently between her hands. "Papa! Wszystko w porządku!" I could only watch, panting a bit as the old man finally calmed down, and stared into my Ma's eyes. He slowly reached up and held her face in his, so they were both cradling each other's. "Irina," he said softly. "Tak, Papa, tak," she said. "Irina." He smiled slowly then, and nodded. He looked over at me. "Buddy." I smiled back, rubbing my wrist where he'd twisted it. "Yes," I said. He nodded again. "Everything's okay," Ma said finally in English. She looked over at me. "What happened?" Then I saw the ink on Grandpa's cheek. "The ink," I said, coming over. "We need to clean off the ink." She saw it then and looked down at her hand. There was ink on it too from when she grabbed him and then transferred it to his face. "What on earth?" she repeated quietly. She looked back to Grandpa, and that's when I knew she saw it. The ink running up the sheets, up his hand, his shirt sleeve, his neck. "What is all this, buddy?" "I'll explain as we clean him off. Let's get his nightshirt off." I motioned to Grandpa to raise his arms. She nodded and explained to him what we were doing. It was a lot easier to communicate with him when you could communicate with him. He peeled off the nightshirt, and sure enough, the ink had snuck in underneath, leaving a fine trail of ink from his neck all the way to his fingers. I picked up his forearm and looked at it, at the glossy, living blackness. I rubbed my thumb and smudged it. That was good. I grabbed the nightshirt itself since it was ruined and began to rub at the arm. "Buddy, don't," said Ma. But I didn't listen because it made no sense. We didn't have time. We had to get all the ink off. All of it. There wasn't time to lose. "Get a wet rag, Ma," I said, still wiping. "Buddy, stop!" She held my shoulder. I looked at her in confusion. She looked at me, and then at the arm. I stopped. And I looked at his arm, too. The ink had been pushed away, but beneath it, more ink revealed itself. Numbers. A tattoo. When we learned Pa died, Ma didn't tell me till that night. I didn't know she'd spent all day just living her life, doing her work, her chores, taking care of me, with that heavy weight on her heart, that a man in uniform had come to our door, that he'd been direct to the point, that he'd told her the truth. She told me at night in bed so she could make me feel better, tuck me in, lie beside me, and stroke my hair, because she wanted me to be ready to be sad. But you can't always prepare for sadness. You just have to live with it. I remembered this now, sitting with her, the clock ticking on the wall, my shoulders heavy, my back aching after scrubbing all the ink off Grandpa. Under the single bulb above the kitchen table, the shadows on Ma's face made her look much older than she was, and very tired. I figured if there was a mirror, I'd see the same with me. It felt like the summer had lasted a lifetime, and maybe it had. I don't know. I'm not sure time works the way I always thought it did. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said finally. "There was so much to tell, and you had this new job, and I never saw you. And I had work too, and then you two seemed to be bonding, and what's the point anyway?" she said. I noticed her long, winding sentence mirrored my long, winding thoughts. I came by it honestly, I guessed. Start at the beginning. Start at the beginning. Like there is such a thing. There isn't a beginning. There's only a moment that makes the moments that follow matter. Ma shook her head because she understood that. "Do you know how many times I've tried to figure out the beginning?" she sighed. "Oh, buddy, it's so sad." I leaned over and took her hand. "It's okay. I can handle sad. Your pa wanted to come here. He wanted opportunity. So many people do. I came with him and brought you, this little bundle in my arms, because he was my husband. Because he made me believe in the adventure. I wanted your grandfather to come with us, but he had his job, his students." "He was a teacher?" I asked. "Can't you tell?" She smiled. "Art." She nodded. Then when things started getting scary over there, I begged him to come. I begged him. He was my only family left, and I thought he needed me as much as I needed him, but he refused. He wouldn't come. He needed to stay for his community, he said. But he did send us his art collection that he wanted to protect, not himself." She looked angry and sad and still so very tired. "I don't understand. Because they're worth something? What's so important about these paintings?" I looked at the one hanging just below the clock, its gilt frame, its bright abstract pattern. "To him, art is more than just a pretty picture. It's history. It's your soul," I said, remembering now. "Yes, the Germans had invaded, and they were taking everything. He wouldn't leave anyone behind, but he didn't want them to get their hands on the work. I was so angry at him at the time, but I understand now. When I hear about over there, when I hear about everything that was destroyed, he was right to send his art, but I can never forgive him for not sending himself." Her eyes were misty with tears. I understand that. I took her hand in mine. Then he disappeared, and I didn't hear from him again. She looked down at the table, her head bent so low. "I was mourning your father. I was taking care of you. I was working to support us, and these paintings haunted me. I was angry, and I thought he was dead, and I was hurting. So I didn't think to look any deeper." A tear fell onto the stained wooden tabletop, right in the middle of a ring made from a damp glass. "This all makes sense, Ma," I said. I wasn't used to reassuring her, to being the one who comforts. I'd always wanted to take care of her, but that was about making money and her not having to work so hard. Taking care of her sadness, her fears, that was something I wasn't so prepared for. It was hard. My throat ached. "You shouldn't feel bad. I tell myself this, but I do, because I should." She squeezed my hand and looked up at me. "When the war ended, your father's brother was looking for family, because that's what good children do. He learned so much, what they had done, what they had sent people like us. Such horrible things. I'm so ashamed. He found Grandpa. A family in a town near the camp where he had been in prison was taking care of him. A family, not his family. Not me." She took in a sharp breath and quickly wiped her cheeks. "Your uncle helped me bring him here, and you know the rest." "Ma, you should tell me these things," I said. "Like you're telling me things about your work? Like you and your grandfather don't have your secret projects?" She smiled, saying this through her tears. "That's different, and you know it," I said. I took both her hands now in mine. "Oh, buddy, I feel so much shame. But you must learn from my mistakes. You have to fight for the people you love. Okay?" Yes, of course I would. I always would fight for her. For Grandpa. It was so easy in that moment to make that promise to her. To myself. It seemed so obvious, so clear that of course this would be a thing to do. I had no idea that in a short 24 hours, that promise would be tested. Once more, I didn't know how I got to where I was going, but it wasn't from full fear or panic now, but from never having felt so completely overwhelmed before. I'd been told so much in such a short span of time, experienced so much. My eyes had been opened wide to things I'd never even imagined, and my own guilt and confusion pressed down hard on me. I reached the East River, coming to realize two things. I had judged my grandfather so horribly, and in the end, it turned out I knew nothing about him or my own family, and that I also knew nothing about Mr. Drew. So how could I possibly understand his motivations? What was happening at work? I needed to know his story. Everyone has a story to tell, even if it's fiction. I tossed the bag with the papers, pen, ink bottle, rags, and my grandfather's nightshirt into the black water in front of me. It bobbed for a moment and then slowly sank. I didn't feel good about it, just more unsettled. The water looked like ink. So, that was the end of chapter 17. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? If so, feel free to leave your comments, like the video, and share it around if you want me to continue. Thanks so much for watching. This is GlowPOP Artisan, or the Apple Lady, signing off. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay sweet, my apples. Ciao!